the actor has to have a relationship with themselves. Well, how do you just try acting if you don't even know what acting is? I say, when you're an actor, you do that willingly. Hi guys, and welcome to Method Acting Coach Now. In this series, we're going to take a deep look at what method acting really is. I'm a professional actor. My name is Manos Koutsis. I'm an actor and acting coach, and I've studied in method for over 15 years. It took me a long time to really get my head around it, but I've learned a lot in the process, and what I've learned, I've applied it to my work. And what I want to do in this series is share with you my process, but also really a look into what method acting is under the Lee Strasberg approach. However, there's a lot of talk about what method acting really is, and there's different schools of method acting. But we're going to talk about some of those myths, and we're going to show you what the reality of the work really is, and how any form of method acting, any form of acting is acting. Okay, I know that might sound a little, ironic or not make any sense, but the truth is, any approach to acting is method. Okay, so we're going to go through exercises called basic relaxation, which is the first fundamental and crucial exercise before you approach the work, and we'll get into that a little later in the next video. Then we're going to go deeper from that into sense memory and talk about what that is and how we use it in the work. Bit of a disclaimer though, this is work that takes years to master, and even after years when you think you've mastered it, it's an elusive thing that you will spend your life as an actor attaining and trying to get that moment. And the whole point of this work is that acting is instinctual. Acting is not a conscious art form. You need intellect in acting when you're preparing for the role, but when the time comes, when the director says action or when the curtains go up, you have to let your unconscious, you have to let your instincts guide you. And listening to your instincts is really what makes great acting. And that's really what method acting is. Okay, so first I want to talk a little bit about, sort of the myths around method acting, okay? So what method acting is not walking around thinking or believing you are the character. That's a myth that's created mainly by, newspapers to sell a film, but in no way is that what method acting actually is. Method acting is short for methodology. It means if you're an actor, you have an approach to acting. You have a methodology. And that methodology is never the same, by the way. Every role will require you to do different things to make the character come alive. But essentially what you are doing is you're using yourself to transcend into the role. Okay? And we're gonna talk a lot about all the different components that you need to do, because let's be clear, acting, there's no quick fix to it. It's a balancing act. It's layering. It's hard work, but after years of dedication and practice, it's fun. And it's really, the point of it is to inspire audiences and to give performances which excite you and therefore excite the audience. So method acting, really what it is using yourself in the work. And it started, of course, from Stanislavski, who noticed that lots of actors, they were giving the exact same performance every night on stage. They would go on stage every night and they would be wooden, mechanical, and say the lines in the exact same way. And he started to think, how can we make acting different every night? And then he started to look into the psychology of it and found that the most important thing in acting is truth, your own truth, and your truth, where you are at that moment, right? Because in the moment, you don't know where you're gonna be psychologically or emotionally or, intellectually. You might have had a bad day, but it's the skill of whatever is going on in your life to use that in your work. Whatever happens on stage that wasn't planned, to use that through the character, thinking, what would my character do? Okay? So, and then what happened is Lee Strasberg, Stella Adler, and Sanford Meisner, they were all part of the group theater in America during the Great Depression. And they dedicated their lives to making authentic, real, truthful performances. And the reason they did it is because they knew by doing that you can inspire audiences. Let me just put to you this story, which sort of sums up the power of method acting. Because as I was saying before, it's very romantic to think like, oh, this actor, he put on so much weight for the character and he believed he was the character, and that's what method acting is. But maybe you would do that, but you would never think that you are the character. But there was a man, and his name is Michael Chekhov, and you might know him. He wrote a famous book, To the Actor. And he was a profound actor in Russia before the revolution, okay? And he had to leave Russia because his acting was so good that they wanted to kill him. That's right. They wanted to kill him because they were worried that he was actually going to inspire people to a revolution, okay? And then, Anton Chekhov, with his work as well, sort of contributed to the revolution that did happen in Russia because they were all under, an oligarchy, the royals were ruling the country, and most people were slaves, basically, to the landowners. Now, just a disclaimer, I'm not a communist, but, it shows you, though, that acting is powerful, and acting can change people. It can change the perception of people. It can communicate with people, okay? And the point of method acting is that in these great pieces of writing, these plays that have soul, but more, they have purpose. They have a purpose to speak to the deeper elements of ourselves. And it is how do we, the actor, get into ourselves, right? And then make the material of that writer mean something to us to then bring it alive and share with people the true voice of the writer. And we're talking about writers, we're talking about Tennessee Williams, we're talking about Arthur Miller, we're talking about Henrik Ibsen, Anton Chekhov, the ancient Greeks, Sophocles, Euripides, right? They were all writing plays not because they wanted to entertain people. And while it is entertaining, they wrote plays because they said, wait a minute, look at us. We are killing each other. There's conflict in life. And that's what acting is. Acting is conflict. Acting and these great plays are showing us the human tragedy is that, we can conceive the idea of a sort of a utopia, don't want to sound too, romantic, but then when we come up against the machine, there is conflict. So if you take a play by Henrik Ibsen, An Enemy of the People, that's a perfect example of that problem, is that you have the doctor, and if you haven't read the play, do read it. Read every play by Henrik Ibsen because he is one of the masters, and you must know his work if you want to take yourself seriously as an actor. But in Enemy of the People, the story is, it's two brothers, and this is brilliant as well because they always take it back to the family. It makes it more personal. And they live in a prosperous town, and one brother is a doctor, a scientist. The other brother is a mayor, okay? And the town is prosperous because they have this wonderful water supply. But the doctor, he thinks there's something wrong with the water, and he does some tests on water, and he finds out that the water is actually poisonous and therefore harmful to its own citizens. And he goes and tells his brother, who is the mayor. But his brother, the mayor, says, you cannot let anybody find out about this, and you cannot make these accusations because our whole town will be destroyed. The riches of our town will be destroyed. And there you have it, conflict. You have the reality of what do we do? Do we let the town burn? Do we let people in the town get sick and drink the poisonous water? Or do we alert everybody and say, for your own well-being, don't drink the water, but in sacrifice to that, our town will suffer. And that is real human conflict. And you see that in every great piece of drama. And really, when we talk about method, we're talking about if we really live this drama, then the audience is really going to feel the impact of that. But if we're just acting from the head, if we're just hitting numbers, yeah, it still might inspire people, the writing, but invariably the audience is going to get bored, right? But when you go into a theater, you want to see actors who are really living this experience, living it. We always know it's a fiction, of course, right? And we do. But there is a place in acting where we transcend from ourselves into the character. But that is us. The character is an extension of us. So, what I'm going to teach you guys in this course is step by step the road to how to make your performances more authentic, more real, fluid, and, essentially how to have fun with acting in the long run. So a little bit about the history as well about method acting is, Lee Strasberg, he took the theories of Konstantin Stanislavski, and he said, okay, how can we make these theories of his, how can we make them more practical? How can we actually put them into practice? And so he developed various exercises, which we're going to go through all of them. But the first one was called basic relaxation. And it is the idea that, the actor are an instrument. And Stanislavski said this as well. You are the instrument. If you're a musician, your guitar or your violin, that's your instrument and you play it. Not to say that you don't need to have soul as well to play it well, and artistically. But we are the instrument, so we only have ourselves to use. And what does that mean exactly? That means the actor has to have a relationship with themselves that, is very clear, that you can hear your own voice. And that does take a long time to develop. Yes, it does, But with these exercises, they're designed to take you on that path. Now, a lot of people say, okay, I don't really need method, but when we really think about what method acting is, there's that famous story of Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier, where they were working on a film, and Dustin Hoffman was jogging every morning because he was playing a guy who jogs a lot, and Laurence Olivier said to him, why don't you try acting, darling, First of all, that story is taken way out of proportion, because lots of people look at that story and they say, oh yeah, why don't you just try acting? Well, how do you just try acting if you don't even know what acting is, I say, and I would also argue that Laurence Olivier was a method actor of sorts. Maybe he worked from the outside in, but when you see his characters, they are very well layered, right? And he was of a different time. He was of a time where people were more in touch with their feelings because the horrors of the world were more transparent to them because of the history. Nowadays, we live in a time where nobody really wants to feel, People just want to feel good all the time, right? But I hate to break it to you, if you want to be an actor, you are going to have to embrace pain. And I don't mean pain, physical pain, I mean psychological pain, your own pain. But when you're an actor, you do that willingly because you have to give every ounce of yourself to it. And every role will affect different things in your unconscious, okay? So what that means is, don't think that you can play, a character like Hamlet who is, he's upset that his father was killed, right? And he wants to seek out revenge, right? Don't think that you can play that character or any other character who's similar and not have your unconscious give you painful feelings of grief for having lost one of the most precious things in the world, your father, your family, right? And if you get that feeling, if you're playing a role like Hamlet or any other role and you start feeling terrible, there's nothing wrong with you. That, in fact, is a good sign because it's your unconscious giving you inspiration to play the role. And guess what? When you speak the lines, when you're feeling something like this and you speak the lines may actually be cathartic and therapeutic in a way, because you're having a relationship with the material. You're using whatever your unconscious gives you and putting it into the words. And that really is the fundamental point of method acting, or any type of acting for that matter. Many actors might say, oh, I don't have a method, I don't do this. But you will find that even if they're not aware that they have one, every actor has to have a method. Otherwise, you're just being yourself and it doesn't really mean anything. But, there's a lot of negativity that I hear from, young actors that, oh, method acting is rubbish, I don't need it. And maybe you don't. To be honest, in today's world, in today's films, you don't need it, because the actor is just a small component of the whole piece. They use music, they use editing, they use all these things to make the audience, have a more engaging experience with the material. But if you're like me, who wants to see nuance in actors when you're watching the work, like a great piece of art, like, a great series, like The Sopranos, all the actors in that show, they're accessing a more personal part of themselves, which makes the experience more engaging. Now, that's not to say that's the only reason why it's greatly written, it's greatly directed. And there's many more series, which are done in that vein. And we see actors give amazing performances. And we may not exactly realize why, because method acting is a very subtle thing, in fact. It's not anything too extravagant. And in fact, it's a small component of acting, but at the same time, a very crucial big one. Because acting is acting. First and foremost, you've got to train your voice, you've got to train your body, you've got to be able to speak and pronounce the words with clarity, especially if you're on stage. But I would argue any actor who's really an actor should be doing stage work as well, because that's where you learn the craft. And it translates as well to when you do film, despite what people may say that it's two different art forms. Maybe there are some small differences, but acting is acting. So that's really, what you're looking for. And I'm going to teach you how to do that, because if you're really having fun with acting, every night on stage, every take in front of the camera is going to be different. It's not going to be different in wild ways. It could be, but it's going to be different in that you're discovering the meaning of the line while you're saying it as well, because you're testing out ideas. Of course, you need to go in with a game plan. What is my character thinking here? What is their motivation? And then, you put those ideas to the test. But when the moment comes to do the take, you sort of have to be able to let go of that and explore, because great acting is exploring, because that's what we do in life. In life, we never think about, we don't often anyways think about how we're gonna, how am I gonna tell, how am I gonna exactly say to my girlfriend that I love her, We just say it. And it's more sort of an intimate, spontaneous experience. And that's really what we want to do with acting. Because what happens is, especially when you're starting out in acting, the time comes to say the lines and then you get tense. And the reason you get tense is because you're pushing for an outcome. You have an idea in your head of how you want it to be, and you try and exactly replicate that idea. But when you do that, you rob yourself of the real richness of the work that we, explore in acting and method acting. See, I don't really like to call method acting, because I just believe it's acting. Because when you're on stage, if you're living it, if you're experiencing it, if you're exploring it, that's the whole fun of acting. Otherwise, you would get bored out of your mind. When I hear actors say that, oh, I don't like doing plays because, after a month or a week, I get bored of doing the same thing every day, the same lines every day. But I would say the reason they say that is because they're just doing the same performance every night, right? But really, you should enjoy saying the same lines over and over again every night, because every night you're exploring it in a different way. You should always approach acting going into it and say, what do I want to do today? What do I want to explore? What element of my character do I want to explore? And you go on stage and you test it out. And lots of actors are scared to take risks. But if you want to be a real actor, I always say acting is like rock and roll. You got to get up there and you got to be ready to fail, right? Because when you're ready to fail, that's when the good stuff happens, Because your mind, like in real life, your mind will tell you, oh, do it this way, do it this way. But when you listen to your instincts, when you listen to your impulses, right, that gives you a whole different thing. And it's scary. And the reason it is scary is because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. But that's the place where real acting happens, is when you don't know where the outcome is going to come from, what it's going to be, right? And then afterwards, you try something out. And what's the worst that could happen, You could just fail and say, okay, that was a bad idea, don't do it again. I mean, at the end of the day, all you're doing is just acting in front of people. It's not like you're, trying to disarm a bomb or something. So no need to stress about it. But yeah, this work, just a little bit about the history of this work. This work that I'm going to teach you specifically is more based on the work of Strasberg. Now, I've had a look, and there's a lot of different opinions about what Strasberg does, what Meisner does, what Stella Adler does. That they're all different styles, right? But they're not. Method acting is not a style. Method acting is, how do I get into the character? That's not a style, okay? And everything those practitioners did feeds into each other. Acting is it's not one quick fix and that's it. Acting is always thinking about, okay, am I listening? It's what is my objective? What is my goal in this scene? But also, how do I propel myself into the scene and really explore it from my experiences? Okay, so, method acting obviously came from Stanislavski. Strasberg, with Harold Clurman, and a lot of other great actors were all part of the group theater, which was a theater company in America during the Great Depression. And they would go away to farm and prepare a show for 2 months, and they would do talks about acting. But Harold Clurman would direct some shows. Lee Strasberg would direct some shows, and Crawford would direct some shows as well. They were the three main directors. And Sanford Meisner, who later became an acting teacher, he was one of the actors. Stella Adler was one of the actors, and many others. And their whole focus was how to make these performances alive so that the audiences can really get something from them and that they can really have that experience in the theater really happening. What that does is it inspires people. It causes revolutions. It causes people to maybe for a day or two think differently about their own actions in life. And so, they would rehearse their shows in that way. And Lee Strasberg also believed that, everything has to be truthful, spontaneous. Even the smallest part in a play, like a one-line role, someone who just walks on, or someone who doesn't even say anything, they've got to do their part with truth and conviction, right? And really live that experience. Otherwise, it's going to break the whole mold. Well, not mold, but the whole, like, let's say, Christmas lights. If one doesn't work, the whole thing falls apart. But of course, we can't always be too hard on ourselves. In the attempt to do this work, sometimes it's going to fall flat on its face, and that's fine. But we're exploring, and we're on a journey of trying to make our work more truthful. So that's a bit about, how they started. And then after that, what happened was Lee Strasberg, Stella Adler, Sanford Meisner, they all went their own way, and they started teaching what they had discovered from the group theater, and essentially what method acting is. And really, even though they may have been focusing on different aspects, they're all talking about the same thing. They're all talking about, how do I, the actor, play the character? And how do I do that in a way which is truthful and inspiring for audiences? So there really is not much of a difference between the approaches, because the approaches in themselves are just approaches, and they're trying to achieve the same purpose. But I've studied for over 15 years with my teacher in method acting, and I cannot tell you how much it has informed my work. And, it starts with exercises, but the more you do it, after a while, the greatest thing that can happen is you don't even need to do these exercises anymore, because it just becomes so ingrained in you. And then the actual material is all the inspiration you need. Well, of course, you'll always need to do some, research and work into your character. That never stops. And the reason you do that research and that work is, again, not because you think you're the character. Like, a great example is Denzel Washington. He did the film Flight. And he, apparently he was reading, manuals of pilots. And he wasn't doing that because he was trying to fool himself that he was a pilot. He was doing that to get into the head of a pilot. What are the sort of things they have to think about? And then that makes your work more detailed. Thinking about, okay, I've got to check this, I've got to check that, the strategy of what a pilot does. And then that's just another element that he can put into his characterization and do his work. Famously, Robert De Niro drove around in a taxi for a while before he did the film Taxi Driver. Okay? But he didn't do that because he thought he was a taxi driver, because he wanted to fool himself that he was a taxi driver. He did that for research. He did that to see, if I get into a taxi and I drive around, what do? I look into my rear view mirror, I'm looking for customers, whatever it may be. And then you come up with more specific choices that you can make. So there's so much to acting, but going around thinking that you're the character, it's not necessarily going to help you. I mean, I will admit it probably does contribute to it, but if you're telling yourself, I am the character, you're lying to yourself, right? You always know you're an actor, right? But the moment you say that, okay, I am the character, then you're telling yourself something that's not true, and it's a bit of a delusion, right? And it's closer to the realm of, maybe you want to portray to the world that you're a good actor. Just a thought, But the more you get into acting, the more you realize it's about just doing work. It's about, okay, my character is an engineer, for example. What are the sort of things an engineer thinks about? How do they think? Are they more practical people? Are they more ethereal people? You discover that along the way, and you make those choices, and that informs your character. There's also thoughts. There's how does my character think, you know? And these are things you need to think about, you know? How does my character think about things? Where do they stand politically? And all these little things are what make up how you play the role. And then other times, yes, we can base our characters on actual people, and that's always great to do, to get out of your own rhythm. And later in the course, we're going to get into that as well. We're going to get into the physical parts, animal work, and different things like that. But the first lesson that we are going to do is called basic relaxation. And it is purely spending time with you, because you need to use you to get into the role, if that makes sense. And by the way, all this work, it will not make sense in the head necessarily. It might do, but the point of the work is, the way you learn the work is by doing. Acting is a doing thing, you know? It's not something you can think your way into. And in fact, Sanford Meisner would say this, and many people in the field said it, you know, in acting, you need to get out of the head and into the body, because the body, that's where the richness is. That's where life lives. You know, the conscious mind is just how we navigate that. But really in our unconscious, in our blood, in our veins, that's where life is pumping. Our heart is pumping life through our body, and that's where we live. And that's what I want you guys to take from this course. So in a nutshell, that's what method acting is. There's a lot to talk about, and it's a subject which you can just, discuss and explore on and on. But I'm hoping that with these videos, I'm going to give you guys a means to begin to see what the work really is and how it can benefit your acting. And by the way, I'm also an acting coach, and if you would like to do one-on-one lessons, please email me in the description below. You'll find my email, and we can do lessons over Zoom, or if you're here in London, we can do them in person, and we can begin your journey into acting the part for real. Okay, that's the introduction. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Please see the next episode where we're going to actually get practical and do the first exercise and talk about what it's about and what it can do for you in terms of freeing you up to play the role. So thanks, and see you in the next episode.